Hey y'all, Amelia here with Higher Standards Caregiver Training. My apologies for being late today. I could not get that live streaming to go, but it is up and running now, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to your weekly 10-minute 2-tip Tuesday. It is a cold and chilly day in North Texas here today. I hope that everyone, wherever you are, the weather is more beautiful than it is here. But with that, we will go ahead and get started. As always, this 10 minutes of education is for educational purposes only. If you hear anything that reminds you of a client, a loved one, anyone that you work with, yourself, who you think needs intervention from a licensed healthcare provider, then please make sure that you get that person to the correct provider so that they can be evaluated and treated appropriately, as this is for education purposes only. Okay, so that said, today I want to talk about something that honestly comes up all the time when I'm doing live trainings, when I'm talking with the owners of the caregiving organizations that I work with. It's something that I'm actively working on putting together some on-demand training for right now, and that is documentation. And in fact, actually, I have a couple of upcoming live discussions that I'm going to do with some industry experts that are directly about documentation. I'm going to tell you about those and give you some info about those at the end of today's 10-minute 2-tip Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. But documentation. It is equally as important that we are documenting well as it is to provide the outstanding care that we want to provide to our clients for all kinds of reasons, of course. But I wanted to highlight today a couple of tips, obviously the first for caregivers and the second for caregiving organizations, really related to documentation. Now, a lot of times my first tip for caregivers, it can be applied to family caregivers or professional caregivers. This one, because it's about documentation, this really and truly is more specifically for professional caregivers, but I do have some cool live stuff coming up for family caregivers that I'll tell you about at the end as well. So if you're a professional caregiver, you know, when you finish your shift, you have to write down at least a few notes about what happened during that shift. And by the way, this is really about, you know, documentation. This tip today is really about documentation for non-medical caregivers. So we all know that we need to write down the things that we did for our clients, right? But it's equally important, and here's the tip, it's equally important to document when you didn't do something. And especially when you didn't do something that was in the care plan that you would regularly do. Now, we all know that in the real world, sometimes stuff happens and there can be extremely reasonable reasons why you might not get one or another task performed. It's so important that instead of just leaving that section blank or not mentioning it all, or you know, we certainly don't want to say that we have done something that we didn't do. Instead of doing any of those things, it's important to just simply say, yep, I didn't do this task, and here is the reason why. Again, we definitely don't want to say that we did something that we did not do. That's a big no-no for a lot of reasons. But we also don't want to just leave it blank, like if it's a checkbox, or we don't want to just not mention it if we're just free writing what we did that day or what we didn't do that day. And the reason is because if you don't say anything about it, then it can look just like you didn't do it because, you know, maybe you didn't want to get it done, or you forgot about it, or some other reason. But what we all know is that, you know, you're there doing the best that you can every day, and that things come up that may be totally, again, very reasonable reasons why something didn't get done. It could be as simple as maybe you had a client who normally, who it's on the care plan to take a shower, and that client just declined having a shower. They just didn't want one. So rather than not saying anything about the fact that there was no shower, it's simple enough to write, didn't have a shower, client didn't have a shower today because the client declined having a shower. As simple as that. And that way, everyone who looks at it knows, okay, this caregiver was aware of what needed to be done. They tried to do what needed to be done. And, because of this circumstance or because the client just didn't want to, that's why it wasn't done. And that can help to eliminate a lot of confusion and a lot of other issues that can come up during the course of the day or the care plan. Okay, so that said, moving on, let's go ahead and go to tip number 2 for today. And this is, of course, for caregiving organizations, and it is also documentation related. Again, kind of going back to what I said at the very beginning of today's 10-minute Tuesday, documentation is equally as important as the care that we're providing, because it is the record of the care that we're providing. So we need to make sure that our caregivers are actually able to do the documentation that we need them to do. So what does this mean for you as the leader of a caregiving organization? It means we want to make it as easy as possible for them to do that documentation and to put all the things in that documentation that we need to be there. It also means that we need to train our caregivers on how to do that documentation. Documentation is something that even highly skilled healthcare providers can really, really struggle with. So it's not always fair for us to expect caregivers to walk in and just know how to do it. When even doctors, nurses, therapists don't necessarily just know how to do it. We have to be trained on those things. So, and of course, we don't need our caregivers to document at the same level that we need medical providers to, but we do need to make sure that they are hitting certain points and including in certain information to protect them, to protect their clients, and to protect our businesses. So we want to make sure and make it as easy for them as possible. And we want to make sure and provide that training for them. As I said, definitely that is something that comes up with my clients all the time. It's one of the reasons that I am working to make an on-demand documentation training module for my clients now. Okay, so those are my tips for today. As promised, I do have a couple of live events coming up that are going to be really in-depth about documentation. So let me tell you about those now. And I'm going to put a link to register for the first one in the post where I'm posting the recording of this live broadcast here on LinkedIn after what I'm posting that. Sorry, I can't talk today. I'm going to blame it on the weather. Anyway, so I'll post the link to register for that now. So the first one is coming up this Friday. It is at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's going to be me and Rick Waterman from LH Brenner Insurance, and we're going to be talking about documentation in non-medical home care agencies and how that really needs to be used and how it can be used to help reduce risk. We're going to be talking for about an hour, so definitely if that's something that you're interested in, that you want to chime in on, or you just want to hear about and get more information on what some ideas are, some best practices are, absolutely use that link to sign up and register. I'll get the link to you so that you can join Rick and I this upcoming Friday. Second thing that I'm doing coming up, Keith Grunig and I from Home Care Answers, we are also going to be having a discussion on documentation next Wednesday, that is November 10th, and we're going to be doing that at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And we're going to be talking more from a medical perspective, from a home care documentation, a home health care documentation perspective, and really understanding how we need to be looking at documentation and what we put in our documentation for reimbursement purposes. When I was teaching clinical documentation to master occupational therapy students, absolutely that was part of the training all the time. So Keith and I are going to be talking about how we need to be documenting and thinking about reimbursement in a home healthcare kind of setting. And that is coming up this next Wednesday, November 10th at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. I'm going to start posting the link to that to register in the next couple of days, so look out for it. If you cannot wait and you really want to just go ahead and get signed up and make sure it's on your calendar, send me a message, put in a comment, let me know, and I will get that link to you and get you signed up for that. And as I said, I know this was a professional caregiver organization, very heavy 10-minute 2-tip Tuesday today. But I do have some really cool stuff coming up for family caregivers specifically. You know, November is Family Caregiver Month. And so I want to do some cool stuff for you guys. I'm going to be hosting a couple of live events over the next few weeks here in November, talking specifically about caring for loved ones with dementia and caring for loved ones with Parkinson's disease, because these are questions that I get asked all the time. So definitely be on the lookout for information about those live events for family caregivers coming out too. And again, if you want to know more information right now, if you can't wait, send me a message, reach out, connect with me, and I will get you the information that you need. Okay, I think maybe that went over by like a minute or two. I'm so sorry. And I'm sorry for the late start. Like I said, having some issues getting that live stream started today. But thanks so much for watching, y'all. I hope that you found this information to be valuable education for you as a caregiver, for leaders in caregiving organizations. If you need anything at all before next week's live 10-minute 2-tip Tuesday, please feel free to reach out to me. And until then, though, y'all, and I will see you next week at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, live here on LinkedIn. Until then, take care. Bye.